I am at the house of Mr. and Mrs. Royal Roulston on 20 Highland Avenue, Salem Center, New Hampshire. And we're going to interview her for her part in the community life in this town. Now, Mrs. Roulston, would you give me when you were born and your parents and where they originated, and as much as you can as the history of the background of your family?
Okay. Well, my maiden name was Lovell. My father was Herbert Lovell, and he came from the Lovells on the Cape in Osterville. And my mother was an Eaton, and she was born in Newbury, New Hampshire, and she was one of 5 girls. And when she was about 12, the family moved to the Dakotas, before it was North or South Dakota, and homesteaded. And she was quite an unusual gal. And when she was 19, she decided she wanted something better than homesteading. So all by herself, she came east. She came to Boston, and she went into secretarial school, and her first job was in a newspaper office in the Brockton Enterprise, in a day when women weren't in newspaper business, but she was quite a gal. And, wait a minute.
Now you've given a little of the background of your family. Now about your own life, starting when were you born and where did you go to school?
All right. I was born in Malden, Massachusetts, on St. Patrick's Day, March 17, 1907.
Make you a good Irishman.
Oh, my brother went around and told the neighbors that he had a little sister, and one of the neighbors said, "Oh, you going to name her Pat?" And he said, "Oh, we can't, we're Methodists." So partly for that reason, we named one of our gals Patricia. Well, we had some excellent schools in Malden at the time, and I think this gave both my husband Royal and I a very good foundation and a very great interest in education from the very beginning. Malden High School, where both of us went, was of such high standing that you could go into almost any college in the country without college board entrance exams at that time. I went into DePauw in Greencastle, Indiana, because I wanted to try some other part of the country besides New England. Kind of like my mother, I guess.
You've had quite a lot of travels in your early life.
Well, I think both Royal and I enjoy travel and excitement and doing different things. When my father was very sick, so I only had 1 year at DePauw, but I did travel around the middle part of our country during vacations. And then I came back and went to Boston University and then to Simmons College School of Social Work. When I got out of Simmons College, I was director of work for women and girls in a settlement house in Boston and lived in the south end of Boston. That was quite an experience.
You sure have had some education and experience before you even begin your mature life.
Well, I think education is kind of our way of life here, because we always are learning something new and learning it and teaching it. And then after Lincoln House, I did some editorial work in the Pilgrim Press, and then I went into YWCA work, and it was then that Royal came back from the tropics where he'd been working, and we both did some work together. He wanted to teach me Spanish because that's what he learned, so we went to Harvard and took some courses. And
that was before you were married or after?
Before. I'm sorry to say. I never have seen Peru. But his tales of living through 3 revolutions down there are really quite hair-raising. Then we let's see, after we got married, we lived in Malden for a little while, so high on the hill we could even see Boston Harbor. Maybe that started our interest in boating, I don't know.
Well, before you were married, where did you first meet him? That is.
Oh, I met him when I was probably 2 years old.
Oh, you've known him,
Yes,
grew up together.
Yes, we went
Yeah.
all through school together. We went through Sunday school together and church. And his mother used to see my mother, and his mother had no girls, and my mother had lost her only boy. So they'd say together, Mrs. Lovell would say to Mrs. Roulston, "Oh, I wish I had a boy." And Mrs. Roulston would say to Mrs. Lovell, "I wish I had a girl." So I think they got together on it.
Oh, yes. Well, that's very interesting.
Then after we were married and had lived in Malden a short time, we went to Pennsylvania to live. My husband was loaned for a problem on leather. He's a chemist, and he's quite a free-wheeling minded chemist and can solve problems of things that he really hasn't been involved with before, and he solved a terrific problem with leather in Pennsylvania. So 2 of our children, Don and Pat, were born in Pennsylvania,
Oh, yeah.
in the wild northwest part of Pennsylvania. And then Royal went to Canada to put in a process in Canada, and I stayed back in Malden. And when he came back, we went to Kentucky.
Oh, yes.
To live.
I know some of your folks up in that
Yes,
area.
you do. The Bohannons you know well. And we stayed there till gas rationing made it imperative for us to move closer. So in November, just before Pearl Harbor, we got in touch with, we were put in touch with Matthias Taylor. And this house was really not for sale, but it was empty. And he did sell it to us then.
Good. Good addition to Salem.
Well,
when you finally settled here.
we certainly, our first contacts were wonderful. Matthias Taylor and Judge Woodbury, and, you know, real.
Men, both men I know well, knew well.
And I believe a man by the name of Howard Turner provided our milk. This as a recommendation.
That's right.
Matthias. So we had a very good beginning in November 1941. And we moved into this house just temporarily. We wasn't exactly what we wanted, and so for, 32 years we've lived here.
Still a temporary.
Yeah.
Well, made a good home for you.
Yes.
Now, what about the children? What are they all doing at the present time?
Well, I think this house was more like a launching pad than anything else, because the 3 children were very active and interested in all kinds of things. Don had this house full of pets of all kinds, particularly snakes.
Oh, dear.
And we've had snakes and all kinds of creatures hibernating in the cellar. We've had turtles of all kinds in the backyard. In fact, the Museum of Science has some of Don's specimens that were very unusual. Don was always interested in animals and entomology and herpetology. And you know, I think Mrs. Felch helped start him in this interest.
Oh, yeah.
They were very, very friendly.
Nature lover.
Yes, yes.
Very much so. And Pat was very smart in her high school days. My daughters attended high school at the same time. And where is she now at the present time?
Well, it's funny.
Oh.
It's funny, after the children were brought up here, Don and Pat and Robin, and Don and Pat went away to school, I didn't think they would ever come back to Salem. But you know, I think being in the legislature gave not only me an insight and a pride in New Hampshire, but the children too, because they all came back to New Hampshire. because Robin was born here, and Robin has a excavation business that really ties him to Salem.
That's right.
He really is a Salemite. Now Pat is in Derry, right by the Derry-Salem-Wyndham marker, tri-town marker, so she's about as close to Salem as she could be.
Yeah, that's right.
And she is a graduate of Swarthmore, and a very interesting person and very alive.
Yes. Now it's Donald. That's on the budget committee for the town.
Yes.
He's quite active in different things in the community.
Yes, he is. I think both Don and Robin are very interested in the town. I think Robin has run for, well, one or two things, minor things.
Well, it's just the beginning.
Yes, it's the beginning. At least he is very interested in what goes on in the community.
That's more than some of the other young folks are around town today.
He works for candidates, too.
Now, let's see, you've had quite a political life in Salem. Now, what was your first elected office?
Well, I think sort of the first step for a woman anyway is the school board, because I began speaking out in the interests of schools. And so the first office was on the school board.
What year was that?
Wait a minute, I'll check.
Oh, all right.
I didn't think this would ever do me any good, but I see that it's an excellent place I can refer to. I'm in Who's Who of American Women.
Good, and that's wonderful to be in that book.
So, I find by the book it says that I was on the school board from 1951 to 1953, and I didn't intend to do anything more than be on the school board. That wasn't a stepping stone for me. I didn't mean by saying that was the first step that I intended to go any further. But I think my husband was interested that I would go into the legislature. I think he would have if he'd had the available time.
Yes, it takes quite a lot of time.
It takes more time than they tell you, yes.
That's right. I find that out. My daughter is up there, but she's enjoying it.
Oh, I think it was one of the most exciting things I ever did. And it seemed that all of the other things that I had ever done before fitted in to make me prepared for that.
That's right. It's different being in state politics than it is local. The pressure isn't quite so critical. That is, you feel freer to do as you think up there than you do in local politics.
Until it comes to the bit about abortion.
Oh, that's true. There's all those things to contend with today that we never had before.
No. Well, I enjoyed the legislature, and I would not have given it up had it not been that Royal asked me to. So many telephone calls at night.
That's right.
And
see, what years were reading that, and probably gives the year.
Yes, 1959, 1962.
Right.
And then he said, please don't run again.
See, you were the second woman, I believe. Was there any other? Mrs. Elizabeth Cooper was the first woman on the school board.
Yes, she was.
You were the second, weren't you?
Yes, and when I ran, people used to say I was the first one, but I wasn't.
No, because I was on the school board with Mrs. Cooper, and she wasn't too well at that time. She didn't attend 1 year at all. I used to drive her from her home to put in every school board meeting. She didn't have any means of transportation. But she was sick quite a lot of the time.
Well, speaking of means of transportation, when I got on the school board, I needed to go around because I thought it was no use being on the school board if you didn't see a school when the school was in session.
Oh, it's a good idea if one has the time.
So Royal got me a little Jeep, and I went around. That's when I went around to the schools.
Oh, yeah.
My Jeep, I got to be
known for that little Jeep.
That's right. Word was passed around town that you were doing your part in checking the schools. I think probably you checked them more than any other school board member for years, and I don't know, but even more than the ones at the present time.
Well, I remember one builder knows this to his regret, because I picked him up on some material that was going into the school that wasn't right, and he had to make good on it. And I think the school addition that was built when I was chairman was the first one at that time, for a while anyway, that was built on time.
What addition was that?
At Woodbury.
At Woodbury. Was that the what they call the Central School Addition?
Yes.
Yes, that's the westerly wing, you might call it.
Yes.
Yes. Any other important things as far as schools or political life?
Well, turned off a minute.
Mrs. Roulston will read what's the title of that book?
Who's Who of American Women.
All right, she's going to read a paragraph in that of what she has done in her lifetime.
Well, I was assistant director of the Green Mountain Camp in Brattleboro, and a few girls from Salem have gone there, so maybe they would know, and it was in 2 years, in 28 and 29. I was involved, like many women are in the town, as director of the Heart Fund Drive at one time, and a few of the other drives in town. When I was in the legislature, I was on the Council of the Problems of the Aging in 1959 and 60, and in 61 was appointed the chairman of that council, and during the time made 2 trips to Washington for very interesting national conferences.
Good.
This was a tremendous experience. Locally, of course, I was involved in politics and the Republican State Committee and the regional Federated Republican Women's Club here. I think probably those are the highlights of it anyway.
Now, what about your YWCA work?
Oh,
You've
yes.
been very active in that, and when did you start that?
Well, I started it really before I was married. I was an executive of the small YWCA in Malden, and then when the children got big enough, I didn't do much when the children were small. I was old-fashioned enough to think that I could do more good with my 3 children at home than out in the community. But then, let's see, in 1962, I began as a director of the YWCA and a volunteer in 1955.
What YWCA was that?
Greater Lawrence,
Greater
YWCA.
Lawrence, yes. We want to get that in there.
Oh, yes. And so I served on the Personnel Committee and various jobs in the YW. And then in 62, I was down there and my legislative term was coming to an end, and they needed someone very badly to do the educational work down there, education director. And the executive was a very close friend of mine. She looked at me and she said, "I'm just about to write an ad. Do you want to help me write that ad?" Then she said, "Well, maybe you would be the director." Well, at least it paid more money than a legislator does get paid. Oh, my husband used to laugh about that $100.
That's right, but it gives an awful lot of New Hampshire people an opportunity to learn about the state government. That's one advantage of it.
Oh, I think that the way the government is set up is just great. And we have real people as legislators, not professional legislators.
Well, if it cut the number and increase the pay, we'd have real politics
Yes,
in it.
and I hope they don't. Well, back to the YW. So in '62, I took over as Director of Education in the Greater Lawrence YWCA, and these were classes in Andover and North Andover, and in Salem, and in Lawrence. And this was very challenging, and I enjoyed it very much. But in the beginning of 1965, we were trying to do something for the youngsters. I can't say out loud underprivileged, you know. So I've got to say neighborhood children. We wanted to do something for them around the area of the YW, area of urban redevelopment. So I started a group and had the cooperation, amazingly enough, of the Lawrence School Committee. And we were given names of youngsters who were most in need of help and the most probable dropouts. Now this can't be quoted out loud, this is just, you know, the very background. So these neighborhood children came to the YW, and I did things with them that I did with my own children. And I suppose it's maybe something like the Head Start program, but it was before anything at all was available for these children.
Oh, there wasn't much in those early days
anything at all
for children of that type.
No. And it got to be a very exciting thing. It was called the Turtle Club, and I guess I won't say why, because I don't want that published either. But these were youngsters that needed direction, as turtles do. And we began in a small way, but it grew and it grew. And a couple years ago, I dropped my education department work to spend all my time with these turtle clubs. And my only assistance has been volunteer help from the Abbott Academy girls. So I have girls from two ends of the scale.
You're still working in that?
Yes, I still am.
Oh my, that's
And
quite a career.
this has been very exciting. It's been written up. I have been asked to write it up in our national YWCA magazine, and the program was copied in several parts of the country. And because these youngsters have grown in poise and an appreciation of their own worth, because they think they're nothing and nobodies, you know.
Well, that's wonderful work, I'm sure.
Just
good thing we have a few devoted people still left to do that type of work. I don't know. There's been more emphasis being put on educating children of that description, and it's expensive, but I guess it's rewarding.
Well, our project is so inexpensive we can't get it funded. They don't want to fund anything from national funds unless there's considerable money spent for it, and we scrounge. Well, that's enough of that. That's probably my biggest.
That's been your life's work, really. Your YWCA has been a lot of work. Now, what activities have taken any active part in the church here in the Salem Center? I think I've seen your name in the newspaper occasionally on church work.
Yes, you probably found out that after having been a Methodist all my life, I was unhappy with the way they, you know, spread themselves into social work.
Yes, I don't like some of that myself.
And so I became a Baptist in 1970, and I've just been very, very happy.
That's something that's changing place. Now, you're still active in that work, and is there anything else that you would like? Let's see what's coming next.
Oh, the Coast Guard Auxiliary.
Oh, yes.
I've been in that since 1959, and I was in the very first all-woman flotilla in all of New England. There aren't very many women in it nationally, but Royal started this all-woman flotilla, and it's very exciting. And now, because we're not supposed to be discriminatory, our flotilla is no longer an all-woman flotilla. But we do participate very closely with the Coast Guard on search and rescue and on patrols. We patrol up and down the ocean every weekend.
You have your own boat, I
Yes.
take it. And what size of boat's that?
It's a 42 feet 8 inches diesel cruiser, and it's heavy enough to take most anything that our waters hand it, and it does a great deal of towing and rescue work.
Didn't you have that in the backyard here at one time?
No, we had the other one,
Oh.
the Sirius we had in the backyard. This is the Banyanda, which is an Australian Aboriginal word that means home on the water.
Oh, yeah.
And this we had built in Nova Scotia for us 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've been a commander in it, and I've been a division training officer, and all kinds of things. Even the governor came on it and cruised on the other one with us.
Oh, yeah. That
And
shows the
Yeah.
cabin and
yeah,
some of you folks there on the boat.
we really spend a great deal of our life teaching, and that's where Spurgeon Smith joined. We had
Oh,
a
yeah.
class up here, and he came into it.
Some of these
No.
pictures would be very interesting. The newspaper pictures we can't reproduce, but the others we can, and I'm sure I'd like to take a few of these better ones and
Well,
make up a good story here.
well, our life on the water has been a very, very exciting one.
What do you have special days that you patrol, or
We're assigned special days,
You're
and we
out.
get orders from the Coast Guard itself in Boston.
how soon do you start that patrol in this?
I laugh because I'm the painter, and the boat doesn't get in the water till I get that 42-foot 8 boat painted.
Oh dear.
And that is a lot of painting. It
Yeah.
has to be all done every year.
What is about the usual time that you put in?
We're lucky if we get in the 1st of July.
Oh, you don't get started too early then.
No, because my work with the turtles keeps up till
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of late. And weather isn't very helpful either.
No. And then you usually run how late in the fall?
Oh, we used to run until December,
Oh.
but our boatyard operator is getting older too, and he decides that's too late for him to wait for us to get out. So he takes us out the last of October now.
Oh, yeah. Shortens the season.
Yes, he does. That wasn't our choice.
I see. Well, that's a pretty well-rounded life, and I'm sure that you don't have many dull moments with all the activities you and your husband are in. And I'm sure that we can make up a story that will be a good addition to future history if and when we get one published.
Oh, great. Thank you.